Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ODIN. I'm Max, filling in for Rich as our host because he's off gallivanting somewhere. With me, we have Guzal, Addison, Blake, Eric. Those are all of our regulars, and as a guest, we have Alper. Say hi.
Hello.
Yeah, today we're talking about toxic masculinity. We're hot off the heels of the Gillette Best a Man Can Be campaign. Can get? Okay. And we just watched that commercial like 2 seconds ago, and we're going to dive straight in to a discussion while our emotions are fresh. So let's real quickly initial reactions to that commercial. What do you guys think?
The first time I watched it, just so many goosebumps all over. I was surprised that something like this hadn't been made before by a company of that size as a marketing campaign. And I loved every single part about it. But after watching the thing, I looked into other people's reactions, and I was really shocked to learn that it wasn't getting as positive a reaction as I felt after having watched it.
Yeah. Blake, I'm going to cut to you because as we were talking about this beforehand, Blake's immediate reaction was negative, and I want to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, I think just there are certain parts of the ad that are good. There are certain parts of the ad that I don't like. For example, there's one shot where there's two little kids on the lawn wrestling, and they
weren't wrestling. They made it clear that one of them was being bullied.
Yeah, that was the first reaction I had. I was like, that doesn't make sense. But watching it again, I think that was supposed to be more towards how a lot of times men feel compelled to react to anger with violence, and that's their kind of, they think that that's how they're supposed to react. And so little boys will just like beat each other up if they get mad at each other instead of just being more calm about it. I don't think they were just play wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, that was the part that was most ambiguous to me. It was just like, guys, like, kids fight all the time, and there's like a difference between bullying and fighting. Like, bullying is like day after day harassment of another kid, and that's not okay. But like, kids are going to get into fights, and you need to let kids sort them out. It's like part of learning how to sort out problems as an adult, and especially as a boy. Like, let little boys kind of fight each other or wrestle sometimes. That's what they do.
I think we've jumped into an immediate sort of first point to discuss in a broader discussion of masculinity, toxic masculinity, and how we handle these situations. The ideas of, kids wrestling, fighting, pushing around, and all of that. I think this is something that's immediately compelling to me because as I grew up, like my brother, who was a lot bigger than me, like we would always wrestle and stuff like that. And usually as a kid, like I didn't like that at all. I wasn't about it. But, and so my reaction is kind of initially negative. But then I also think about how that sort of thing might have made me a stronger person growing up, that sort of might have given me more, I don't know, confidence or strength in the world.
Your physical limits.
Yeah.
A big part of being a little guy is testing the limits of your strength so that you know for later in life what you're capable of. So if I now start wrestling with someone, whether it be a guy or a girl, then I might find that my strength is a lot more than I expected, and I might hurt somebody seriously. But when you're a kid, you're not that strong, and the games that you play are fairly harmless. And it's during that time that you, in my opinion, can sort of start to test what it means to be a man and what it means to have this amount of strength and how you can use that positively instead of to hurt other people.
I mean, I think what really happened with this ad is that they tried to take so many, like such a wide variety of examples and like just put them all one after another under like one umbrella term, and some of it was ambiguous. So if people are leaning a certain way on, and masculinity has been in the media lately, toxic masculinity specifically. So if somebody has one particular leaning and they see this, they're going to take it and think of a bunch of other examples that are in their head that maybe aren't even in this commercial or something. And it's just like a Pandora's box of context that they've just layered all these different things on top of each other.
Yeah, but I don't think the purpose of the ad was to nitpick the different examples they used. It was trying to communicate this larger message of men can just be better than they are. And they weren't saying all men. That's one of the things that they've been getting a lot of
because they said some men already are.
Yeah,
right. That was
exactly. Yeah. But they just said it's not enough. It shouldn't be that we have these are random numbers, but 7 men shouldn't be good, and then the 3 can just go around sexually assaulting people and beating other people up. Like, that's still not enough until everyone is a decent human being, I think is what they were trying to say. So focusing on that one scene is the opposite of...
Yeah, we just jumped in and focused on one thing, and I think that you're absolutely right. We should look at the bigger picture of the ad first. And my reaction was it seemed pretty unoffensive to me. Like, it seemed, and a lot of the people that I don't want to jump to saying a lot of the people I've spoken to, because that's kind of anecdotal, but a lot of the people that I've spoken to, a general consensus was it seemed kind of fairly unoffensive, fairly straightforward. And that's how I feel about it by and large is, I think it is an important message that needs to be said of generally a lot of guys. There are really negative aspects of male behavior. We've got some friends next door having a good time. We're still working on the soundproofing, so. But yeah,
I think that ambiguity is by far the biggest problem.
Yeah.
I think that we jump to that certain case of the kids playing because that's by far the most specific example of it, because I went back and I paused that video in several places, and to me those kids are smiling and laughing while they're playing. But like,
show me them receipts, boy.
I can show you later, but
all right, I want a screenshot of the smile on both of their faces.
I think that's not that important, because you're not going to be able to have little kids actually enact a fight. So I think that might be a problem with filming.
Instead I think pretty clearly the message of that was kids fighting, and that's negative and destructive behavior.
That's not how we treat each other.
That's not how we should treat each other, and
which I think it's how we should treat each other as
that's
little kids.
How guys treat each other.
That's a part of it.
I think play fighting is fine, but I do not think like someone trying to overpower someone because they want to force their will is bad.
So also the thing is, you kind of want guys to fight and get like close to hurt when they're young, because they can't really damage each other when they're like 10. I was in one fight in my life, and it was with one of my best friends over something stupid, and we just like wrestled in the front yard, punched each other a few times, and that was it. You learn that that's stupid. You learn that is stupid when you're 10 years old and you can't like kill somebody accidentally,
Definitely. I went to a military school for high school, and one of the scenes that I remember most vividly was me eating my lunch at this very long Hogwarts-esque table, and I was at the head of the table. And just to the right of me, there was 2 guys that were seniors, and they had gotten into a little tussle, and one of them lifts the other one up by the neck and off the ground and slams him on the table in front of where I'm eating, and they start choking each other out and hitting each other in the head. And you start to see, when you don't learn at a young age what you're capable of, you can really do serious damage later in life.
As a counter example to that, I think the argument could be made that by not getting in when kids are fighting young and being like, that's unacceptable, this is unacceptable behavior, then it promotes and allows that to continue. But I don't think that that's entirely complete either, because I think that it is meaningful for kids to get an understanding of physical conflict, because that can be a part of life. Because the other side of this I'm seeing is that preparing men for being in the world, realizing that that physical confrontation may be something that happens, and having a sense of security, having a sense of ability, like understanding your body and all of that, seems helpful and meaningful. You know?
Yeah, you have to make sure you have that like that mindset of like, this is a last resort. Like this is like the kind of respectful mindset, like the martial arts mindset. Like you do not use this to like show off or like for prowess or anything like that. Like this is for self-defense. And
I think we all agree that violence towards women or violence, any sort of sexual harassment, is not a good thing, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. The question that I have is, where do we draw the line between like completely throwing masculinity out the window and having some masculinity?
Yeah, I think this is the broader discussion to be had about this video. Is I think we're all in agreement that the general message of the video is pretty positive, but it is the details, the nitty-gritty details of how far when does masculinity become toxic masculinity?
And that's what the video doesn't highlight. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make a clear point on where should we stand on what sort of masculinity is okay.
What specifically do you mean when you say throwing masculinity out the window? Because when I see a video like this is what confused me about other people's reactions, because I couldn't see what about this implied masculinity or manliness being reduced. This to me just seemed like, oh, it's still just as manly, and in fact it's more manly because it's more like being more informed about the decisions you make. I don't know.
Well, for example, there's some scenes that make reference to, like, one of them is a guy that's standing on the street corner and sees an attractive girl and then starts to go after her and just go up to her or something of that sort. And his friend stops him, right? And so this conveys to me, this is confusing to me.
Except instead of just going after her in that situation, it was more like,
it seemed predatory.
Yeah.
Like
I think it was pretty obviously predatory.
Did you hear that he catcalled her when he did it? Because I did not hear.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he catcalls her, but it's like lower level than the rest of the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm just confused by a lot of it.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this gets to I think that a lot of the negative response to this video isn't so much to the video itself. It's to a broader sense that masculinity is under attack, you know, and that this video, which is coming out against toxic masculinity, it might not be that the video itself has stuff that's negative that we see that people see as being very harmful. It's that it's a point in a broader dialogue of what is the role of masculinity today, what masculinity is cool, and when is masculinity considered toxic. And for people who feel as though masculinity is under attack in a lot of ways, they can take some of the vagueness of the video and naturally have a very strong emotionally negative response.
I feel like all of the ones who were completely outraged by the message are the men that partake in these activities that were displayed. Because if you don't do any of that stuff, you have no reason to be outraged or have a completely negative reaction to it.
I think it was mostly people who are more traditionally masculine who felt like they were being confused for rapists. So if that makes any sense. If their like style of masculinity was being conflated with like horrible things like that.
Doesn't that speak to the fact that their style of masculinity might be wrong if it can be confused for...
So regardless of the video, where do we think we should draw the line
That's what I think we should start discussing is when does masculinity become toxic? And because I think that's a good point of what you're just saying is that if behavior, Guzal, sorry, is that if people are seeing what is a relatively mundane expression of like some clear examples of poor behavior, and then having a very strong negative response to it, that seems to indicate that the traditional values of masculinity that some of these people have might be very tied up in what we're seeing.
And it also would point it to it if it weren't so ambiguous. That's what Addison and I were saying with like the problem with ambiguity. I guess what I'm trying to say by problem is that's why I think that's what I think the reason is for the negative reactions.
Yeah.
So it was.
That's where I think it comes from.
So it was the execution, not the message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think it was like, I think that this topic has been in the media lately and it has been charged, and they were obviously going towards like one side of the political distribution, trying to attract viewers like that. Like Nike with the Colin Kaepernick ad, like they were literally stellar business move because they traded like a bunch of old people who are about to die for like a huge proportion of 20-year-old buyers essentially. So,
That's one thing I'd like to ask real quick before we go into the dividing line is, do you guys think this
Power
was a marketing
move.
it was marketing.
This is my real complaint, if you will. I'm actually the message behind the ad and the execution. I'm largely fine with. My sort of complaint more is the commercialization of serious issues towards generating ads.
I have some information on this.
Go for it.
I researched a little more into the ad, and almost every single negative response, Gillette said that this goes beyond just a commercial or a marketing strategy. They're actually promising to donate a certain number of millions to organizations that help better men. They're partnering with Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and they said that yes, this may seem like a commercial to you, but we're actually promising to everyone as a company that we're going to help make men better.
And that's very admirable. I think that's pretty admirable.
Isn't that what every business person eventually wants to do if they're not completely focused on money, is make a change or make an
It's
impact
also
in
what
some
every
way?
company says that they're about too. Like a lot of companies claim, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
like I'm not trying to downplay it, but a lot of companies also say that kind of stuff to sound altruistic.
I think that it's more than me having like a strong negative reaction to they shouldn't do that.
But I know what you mean, though. It's like it feels like they're making money off of an issue that matters.
It's very weird to me that corporate entities are becoming cultural entities. You know,
being morally like.
Yeah, but I guess that's always been the case to some extent. But I think it's becoming more and more common that as our cultural sphere is becoming more and more polarized, that corporations are now becoming big entities that are trying to enact change in the cultural sphere. And what you're saying about people having businesses and wanting to do the right thing, I like that. That's wonderful. But then there's the other side of just the fundamental profit motive that just throws me off. And I think it's fascinating above anything else. And I'm interested to see how this pans out in the future.
I mean, I think the profit motive thing is fine because that's how, if we want capitalism to work best, we should have consumers who demand that the businesses who benefit off are buying their products give back to the community in some way. And that's what we do. We pressure them into doing that. And that's great. And then we also have tax cuts that get them to do that also. You can donate a bunch of money to charity and it comes out of your bottom line. You don't get taxed for it. So it's like, yeah, we just set the system up. So even if maybe deep down in their heart there's some greedy scumbag, they're going to give a bunch of money to charity anyways because that's the system.
I think
So
that's
cool.
One of the best trends, one of the best modern trends is that corporations are actually holding themselves accountable
Yeah,
to
and
their
like
messages and to their customers.
and this our generation especially like really holds businesses accountable for what they do, especially even like with a lot of environmental stuff, which is awesome. And it's always like
One of my favorite things.
yeah, and like people want to like burn capitalism down, but I'm like, look, we're getting better. Look, we're doing better.
I guess I actually consider my viewpoint changed, because I think you guys presented a really solid argument there. And,
Viewpoint about what?
just that feeling grossed out by
It's 'cause,
corporations.
like, we want to set up
doing
this. We
cultural
want to
stuff.
set up this system so that we can extract talent when we find it, because talent's rare. Like, so maybe these people aren't the nicest, but they're really, really good at organizing giant companies that bring us razor blades that are really good.
I
don't
think
know.
my broader frustration or my broader complaint with this is just how much corporations influence the world we live in today. It just and that is so I would say that this is probably a positive aspect of that, corporations being accountable and trying to enact positive change, but the broader thing of corporations really having a huge impact in our culture and society, that's
Seems like corporations then accelerate cultural change, because the corporation will try to appeal to whichever consumer base is growing the most. And if there's a lot of young people with a certain viewpoint that are going to become a larger consumer base over time, they're going to want to appeal to those consumers rather than to old dying people.
And I hope this means that people are becoming less materialistic too, since this trend is going on. I feel like that's where your initial reaction might have stemmed from, is that hey, we just don't like materialism and we want good things.
Yeah. I think let's move on to the discussion of when does masculinity become toxic, and what is the role of masculinity within society.
I had a little bit of a question for Blake. So when we were first, and this ties back to earlier, but when we were first talking about the ad, your reaction to it was that you disliked it. And it wasn't just that you disliked it. You seemed almost angered by it, as in there's something that you're really passionate about that you believe in, that this kind of struck at deeply.
Well, I just think it's very important that we find distinctions between what's a good type of masculine, what's a bad type. And I don't think you can cover that in a minute and 30 seconds. And so similar to what some of you were saying, I'm not even sure if it's the role of corporations to take a stand on issues like this, right? Because, it's a very nuanced issue, and it's something that can't be covered in an advertisement.
So is that what about the ad specifically made you angry? The fact that you felt like this corporation was trying to meddle with...
Well, no, it was very unclear to me, and I felt like the ambiguity of it was sort of attacking masculinity as a whole. Now, maybe that was a perception that wasn't warranted, but
where I sort of share that feeling is the line, "Some men are, already doing this." I think that's kind of a perspective that sets it up for saying that the men that are good are in the minority. The people, like masculinity that is good, is in the minority. And I think that's what causes that sort of gut reaction for me, kind of connecting it to a broader issue of what is the role of masculinity in society today, that made me have a bit of an emotional reaction.
But then we'd have to quantify how many some is. For me, some could be half or a majority.
Yeah,
or
for
a
me,
minority.
some men is at least more than it was in the 1950s. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
I guess that's a really good point, because it's this is why this is such a touchy issue, is because it is a huge problem, and quantifying how big of a problem it is kind of difficult. And I think the message that it was saying is we've swept this under the rug for so long. There's a lot of merit to that. There's a lot of truth to that.
Also, the problem with talking about men in particular, why it's a little bit sloppier, is because there's actually, in personality traits, there's greater male variance and like all personality traits, including disagreeableness, which is like predicts like if you're going to participate in behavior that'll get you put in prison, essentially, things like that. And men vary in traits more than women, and this is observed in like a bunch of different species, but we never talk about it in humans because nobody ever wants to talk about it. But men vary a lot more, essentially because we're more expendable. And we try, like, as like human beings, our DNA is altered more, so we're set more to try high risk, high reward things. So, you know, we fill 90% of the slots in prison, and that's just how it is. So there's always going to be like, I feel like there's always going to be a larger amount of men who are doing bad stuff than there are women. Men are just less agreeable. Yeah. They're more dangerous.
All right, continuing the discussion, we have Logan jumping in and joining us. You want to introduce yourself real quick? Say hi.
Newest member of ODIN.
Hey, let me just say a little bit about myself.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm a junior in aerospace engineering here at Tech, and I thought I could listen and not say anything, but I'm going to have to get in and say something because it's eating me up. My take on the ad was, I think a lot of the people that got mad were really missing the forest for like the trees. And the biggest thing is I don't really think it was like going after people's like masculinity. I think it was more or less just saying, don't use the fact that you're a guy as an excuse for like terrible behavior. Like that's not an excuse. It's not, I don't think it was really meant just to go after people. It's like, don't be manly. I think it was more like find better ways to resolve things than use force. Like the example where the people were fighting or the guy was going to go after the girl. There should be better ways to resolve problems than force. And I think that was one of the big things that the ad was trying to get across.
So most of us are pretty much in agreement that, like, okay, the ad was attempting to make solid points, but maybe the way that it did it was unclear to some people.
I think some of us had a stronger reaction towards the ambiguity than others. Yeah, you guys want to just...
I'm just going to also bring this up. I saw on like a lot of conservative media pages that they noted that like all of the dudes doing like a bunch of bad stuff were white, and then all of the guys doing good stuff were black.
I did notice that as well.
That's interesting.
Isn't that a cool juxtaposition to every other media though?
I mean, it's just obviously
Yeah.
skewing it towards like marketing towards a certain demographic.
Let's
but we don't have to be offended.
So
by it.
yeah, what if we just had, what if all commercials were like split 50-50, like half the people doing shit were white and half the people doing shit were black, like, but it's like it's almost like we have two different sides of media. We have like conservative media and liberal media now, and we have commercials that are made for liberals and we have commercials that are made for conservatives.
That is wild, because that's so true that we actually have commercials that are directed wholly towards a liberal audience or a conservative audience. I mean, at the same time, I think that this message was also meant to go out to everybody, but I don't know. It was clearly more left-leaning.
So what is masculinity?
Yeah, let's get into that.
Wait, one thing real quick I want to just bring up really quickly too is the like market reaction after this commercial. There were other like razor companies who came out and were like, screw Gillette, like we embrace traditional masculinity, come to our razor company. And then like Harry's razor company like joined Gillette's side, and now like razor companies are split.
Awesome.
Men's razor companies are split on ideological lines now.
It's just weird. We
crazy.
live
In
in
one
such
fell
a
swoop.
weird world.
Splitting hairs. Sorry, that was so bad.
Nobody heard it until you pointed it out.
Okay, let's begin the discussion about when does masculinity become toxic? What do we feel? Those of us that feel like aspects of masculinity are under attack. What are those aspects? And where does that line exist? Blake, I'm going straight at you. Where what aspects of traditional masculinity, if you will, do you think are under attack today?
It's men are like this force for action in the world. So like initiation for various tasks, and it's sort of like it's an idea that we have that men are leaders. Men are they start movements. They have passion about this and that. Not to say that women can't do that stuff as well, but for example, if you're on a date with a girl and you want to move things forward and maybe establish that there is some sexual attraction in that situation, then you might use various ways of touching them or things of that sort, flirting. And so what we just need to discuss is the fact that there's this initiation quality to men where you begin things and you start with flirting and you start with the this and that. And so when does it become too far? When do you know the girl enough to where you can start to make movements? There's these laws in California now where you have to have verbal consent to move forward physically, which is just not how humans function. Exactly. I mean, it's just not, you can't have a verbal, yes, I'm okay with this, let's proceed at every junction.
The flip side of that is that, and this is what a lot of people's idea of toxic masculinity might come out of, is that because a lot of men feel that they are the ones supposed to be initiating, and because situations like this can be ambiguous, people have a tendency to see what they want in a situation that's ambiguous and try to force things onto another person or lead someone in a direction that they don't feel comfortable with.
Wait, before we continue, let's try to word this non-negatively. Do you not see any problem with your first opening statements where you said men are the initiators, they're known as leaders, they're known as the people who start movements, because women do all those things too, and that's one of the problems, is that men are the first examples we go to when we think of leaders, and it shouldn't be like that, because women can and will do as much as men.
What I see this as in a larger context is our final, us still adapting to the huge impact of the birth control pill, because for the entirety of human history, it was difficult for women to go out on long militaristic voyages and things like that. That just wasn't feasible until the 1950s. And
well, it's still not entirely feasible for sanitary issues and things of that nature.
I mean, it's feasible. There's plenty of things they can do. I know there were some studies by the Marine Corps that some squads with women had lower standards, or not lower standards. They had lower scores on tests and stuff like that. But there's still plenty of jobs that they can do. And I think what we have to adjust to is not thinking of these things in so much as black and white, but thinking of them as masculine and feminine, big M masculine, big F feminine. So a woman can do a masculine thing, right? And then so we can still have our traditional ways of sorting actions, and even sorting things like Spanish and other languages are literally things are sorted into the categories male and female. So we don't want to completely throw out the categories of male and female, because those are hardwired into us. But we have this amazing new technology that allows women to partake in masculine militaristic voyages and anything they want now, and we can adjust to that. And I also think we can adjust to that with with marriages and things like that. I think fundamentally for childhood development, it's great to have two parents, and I think you need a masculine and feminine side, but two men can do either one of those, or two women can do either one of those.
Yeah, I don't want to disregard the fact that different genders can adopt the stereotypically assigned roles of the other gender.
Yeah.
I think
and that's rapidly changing. We're doing it more and more. We're adapting as like a species. We can like see ourselves evolutionary adapt to technology that we imposed on ourselves throughout history.
Max, what were you saying?
I think
pretty
we've
wild.
identified one of the key sticky points of this sort of debate, which is the idea that there are virtues that we traditionally think of as that we treat as being masculine. Virtues, some of them that we've identified are like strength, initiation, action, leadership. These are all very positive traits, and they're things that we culturally associate with men and masculinity.
Associated.
Well,
but
no,
we
it's
still-
not. No,
it's still
hold
masculine.
on. Neurochemically speaking, men have twice the serotonin. Testosterone causes increased serotonin, which causes initiation, action. I mean, it's literally built into you to be a man and to go and initiate stuff.
But
I'm
hang
not a
on.
very
Completely-
initiative person.
Yeah, hang on, guys. But the thing is,
Greater male variability.
the idea that these things are traditionally these positive qualities that are associated with men, the fact that they're associated with men does not mean that they are not positive traits that women can also fulfill.
Well,
However,
why is it not initiating something not positive? Is it fine to have someone initiate something and then have other people follow that initiative?
and this is where we have, I would argue, we have traditionally feminine virtues that are very positive. That, and I
Equally
say
as
traditionally
necessary.
feminine, not only for women. I think that these are traits that the best people on either gender, male or female, exemplify both of these traits to the fullest. That men, the most optimized men, will exhibit strong ability to use traditionally masculine and traditionally feminine traits, and the same goes for women. But when we hear, oh, men are masculine, men have these traits, there's a natural response of, well, why not women too? And I think that that's where and then from the male, traditionally male side, the response is, oh, you're attacking these things. You're trying to take these things away from men. These things that we think of as being empowering men are under attack. And I think it's sort of a miscommunication. But it's a relevant miscommunication. It's a thing that's a really tricky thing we're trying to figure out.
The one piece of evidence of masculinity being under attack that I forgot about is the APA actually publishing traditional masculinity as like pathology or something like
which
that.
was only like 2 weeks or something before this ad came out.
Yeah, which was really recent. Yeah, and I haven't looked at the specific wording of what they consider to be traditional masculinity, but they've essentially like masculinity, like they define traditional masculinity as a psychological condition.
So traditional masculinity
pathology.
being what?
Like it's a psychological disorder.
But what is traditional masculinity?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the exact wording.
I'll look up the AP
We can.
thing.
I want to address something Blake said earlier. You said why the other characteristics aren't. You said the other characteristics are as positive when you were speaking about how these qualities of strength and leadership are associated with men, but a follower is not as positive as being a leader.
Well, I think that's completely false.
In an interview, when they say list your strengths, are you gonna say I'm a really great follower?
But the ability
course,
to
you can.
harmonize with a community and the ability to work cooperatively with other people and be able to take a step away from needing to be in charge all the time, that is something that we consider like harmony. Social harmony is a traditionally feminine virtue that I would say is sort of the absence or opposite of leadership, but is equally positive. in
The
its
sign
own
of a great
But
leader.
leadership
Hold up.
gives you more rewards.
So I
than-
think,
But
I think
it
you're looking
needs-
at.
it
I think
needs
you're
to
looking
do
at
that.
it.
Focus, Eric, you go ahead.
I think you're looking at it like just like the words that you used are kind of non-complimentary. One of my favorite quotes, it's from the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and it's like the grandma who's like the like matron of the family essentially, and she says like men are the head of the family, but women are the neck. So it's not that it's not like leader and follower. It's like force and direction. I think of it like a vector actually. There's magnitude and direction, and like women set the direction for us, and then men are the force, or the feminine force is the direction, the masculine force is the magnitude of it, if you want to think about it that way. So they're both
necessary.
And one example of this was more pronounced before the birth control pill, but it was like obviously 95% of the workforce was men before the birth control pill, and like 95% of the consumer decisions were women. And it's like, well, who's really winning there? Men are going and doing all this work. They're getting resources and putting together products and stuff like that. And women are telling them what they want. Women are doing the supply. So it's a cooperation thing. And there's always been these two masculine and feminine forces, and it's even mirrored in the dichotomy of our brain, the left and right hemisphere, that they work together in balance.
But I think we should also acknowledge the fact that those two things are interchangeable. Like the woman can be the magnitude and the man can be the direction.
Absolutely.
Which is our entire desire.
Absolutely. And we can do that even more now after the advent of the birth control pill.
Yeah.
So one viewpoint that people have now is that so you said that you saw men as being traditionally the leaders, and that even though that men might generally gravitate more towards that slightly, we shouldn't see it as men should be that way. If that happens on its own, we'll say, okay, that's what happened, but we shouldn't expect that out of men and shouldn't not expect that out of women. And
I mean, I wouldn't say
that's my question. So why should we expect that?
I didn't say that we should in the past, men have been leaders. I'm doing exactly what you said, observing a phenomena that has occurred.
I think my take on it is that viewing masculine traits, and masculine, not men only, but traditionally masculine being the umbrella term to describe a lot of traits. We should view these things as positive traits that, in my mind, both genders, everybody should seek to optimize these talents. And same goes for traditionally feminine traits. I strongly believe that both genders, men especially, should seek to optimize traditionally feminine traits like, harmony, social balance, empathy, respect, and all those sorts of things. I think humans should try and do all of these. Where it becomes tricky is in the sexual dynamic between men and women. And I think that this is the key to a lot of where this conflict arises, is that there's two sort of avenues of being in which we need to look at these issues. One is in the just regular world, the business world, walking down the street, all of that, of how should people be acting, how should people be treated, how should people, what ideals should people seek towards. And I do think equality and optimization of both of these is very important. But in the sexual dynamic, our culture is swayed heavily towards masculinity is desirable and attractive, and straight women, masculinity is by and large very attractive. That's what people select for. And femininity in women is very attractive. And so I think it puts guys in a difficult position, and probably women in a difficult position, that we feel as though we have to overemphasize or we have to exhibit these traits, one side especially, in order to be successful in the sexual, landscape. This is way too complex of a topic, and we're coming up on our time. So, thanks so much, guys. I think this has been a fantastic discussion. To our listeners out there, we're going to come back to this topic. We're going to bring some more women on, so it's not just, five guys and Gazal. And, so Tune back in for a further discussion on masculinity, femininity, and the social versus sexual dynamic. Thank you.